Hi, I'm Catherine Llewellyn, the host of the podcast. You can find out all about Truth and Transcendence on truthandtranscendence.com. And you can find out all about me on beingspace.world, where you will find my online coaching offering as well as my UK-based workshops. The Freedom of Spirit workshop for liberation and empowerment, the Pellower Radical Shift in Consciousness workshop for spiritual expansion, and transformational coaching for exploring the mind-body-spirit connection on the expansive path. You can also support the podcast by actually making a donation. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to Truth and Transcendence. You can find all our other episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. So today I'm delighted to welcome special guest, and I'm going to try to get the pronunciation right. MaAra Divine is a galactic shaman, soul guide, and best-selling author of Mastering Quantum Creation, which, if you're watching on video, you can see behind me. With 25 years of experience, she blends quantum, shamanic, and psychological tools to lead transformative workshops and sessions. As founder of the Source Language Institute, she teaches light language and activates multidimensional awakening. Her work unites galactic wisdom and energy alchemy, weaving ancient knowledge with modern insight. Deanna guides seekers in ascension, embodiment, and remembrance, and also hosts the podcast Soul Communication. And you can find her at dianadivine.com, which is spelled DianaDivine.com. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Catherine, for having me on. I'm delighted to be here.
Excellent. Well, I was saying before we started recording that I almost feel like I've spent considerable time with you in the last few weeks reading your amazing book, which took me on a journey all around the world and also out to galactic realms. And it's full of meditations, which is so beautiful. So when you came on today, I felt like we'd just been talking just yesterday.
Oh, I love
Because the
that.
way the book is crafted. So I'd like to come back to the book, but let me start by asking you about, there was something we spoke about on the pre-call, which was this beautiful word, transmutation. And I remember you saying you had a real connection with that word and what it means. Your story is so rich, it would be almost impossible to know where to start. But could I invite you to just cast your mind back to when you first really clicked with this notion of transmutation? Can you remember when that was?
It's a great question. I think it really clicked in, as you say, when I realized that I need to embrace the shadow aspect of myself. And I call it, as you know in the book, these different stages of awakening. We go from the scorpion to the eagle to the phoenix. So the subtitle of my book is Awaken the Phoenix Within. That's when I stepped into my phoenix. And the phoenix is, as many probably know, is this powerful bird that kind of goes into the fire, transmutes, burns through all the layers that do not serve. And new version is emerging from the fire, much more resilient and stronger and powerful, right? That's the symbol. And so it's very primordial energy, really, the phoenix. And so I've been on a shamanic journey for a long time, and actually different animals were connected with me, like an eagle and an owl. But there was this moment of where my phoenix came out, and she was like, showing me through space and time my different roles, but also teaching me that sometimes we have to go through these difficult periods in time where we see a lot of death, where we see destruction, to transmute the shadow into the light. And really, not specifically to the light, I would say to integrate into the void. So the light and the shadow, kind of the yin yang, have both place for us to understand polarities. And the polarities outside of us, but really start within us. I mean, everything within even our body, like the feminine, the masculine side of our body, the right, the left eye, everything is kind of symmetrical, but each one kind of is part of the equation. And we learning to rebalance that equation within ourselves. And as we come into this place of equilibrium, that's the void space. That's like the 0 point. And and we step into, in yogic tradition, they call it Shushumna Nadi, the central column, the pillar of light. And that pillar of light, it's what connects us through all the dimensional layers. So literally can like imagine this pillar of light going right around the body, all the way to the core of Mother Earth and to the core of our galaxy. And so for me, transmutation is that ability to integrate. And so it's beyond just transformation. It's really integration. And I believe this is what we're here to do on Earth. We are here integrating with transmuting different aspects of ourselves that on Earth, off Earth, dealt with wars, galactic wars, all of these different polarity games into the moment and now, and kind of unifying them into this present moment. It's almost like rebalancing it back into oneness.
Wow. Fantastic. And when you had this Phoenix emerging experience, what sort of age were you then?
I would say that actually happened not that long ago, full on. I think in my 30s when I was already on the journey, I would say for a while, over 20 years. And it took I would say peace in different parts of myself to come to that place. It's very empowering place because we often, many of us are light workers, so we like to call ourselves that. We tend to put on these pink glasses and we just deal with certain levels of energy. Someone who's a shaman has to go also into the darkness. They have to also heal different traumas of others and transmute and transform them into another level of energy and frequency. But it's sometimes easier to do it for others than for yourself. So it does take, this embodiment process to fully step into it yourself in full form and also realize that you are a creative being, you're a quantum creator, you are that phoenix. So a phoenix is much of creator as destroyer of worlds. The, the creation part sometimes is easier for the mind to comprehend, but to comprehend because it's polarity game, there's a destruction that happens sometimes simultaneously. So there's a collapsing of timelines, there's a collapsing that has to happen. Universe essentially operates in the constant change, and it's about expansion and contraction. Expansion and contraction. So within ourselves, we expand, and somewhere we need to contract and again expand a bit further. So it took me time to really step in and embody that realization that I am that energy. And in this human body, this human experience I'm having on earth is just one expression of it.
Beautiful. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that aspect of it because I think sometimes we imagine that either someone's just born with this sort of light shining out of their forehead and this glow around them, and, there's no work to do, you know, um, or that they can just get it over a weekend, let's say, or they don't get it until just before they die. So you that place where you got it, and as you just said, you've done a lot of work and traveling before that. In fact, in the book, I was really struck by some of your story about when you were a very young child and your sensitivities at that point and what you started working with at that point, albeit without the same degree of awareness that you have now. Would you like to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think in the book, you're referring to my earlier days in Minsk, Belarus. It's Soviet Union at the time. And yeah, I didn't have the awareness, but I think I always was curious about the environment I was at. That environment was very interesting. From one perspective, it was a very open environment in terms of like I think in the book I mentioned how I would get on a bus at the age of 6 and would travel around the capital city, and the adults wouldn't even necessarily ask me where your parents at. That type of open environment, I can only imagine like my kid getting on the bus and traveling through a major city. That would never happen, really. It was different times. I was also very, I would say, old soul in a way that my parents really trusted me, and I was very independent. This is kind of different story with my sister, but with me, they just knew that I know how to get to places. But often enough, I wouldn't even go where I needed to go. I really love to explore and travel, so I would get on different buses and then just take it wherever it takes me, and then explore and get back on the bus. And only when I think I was at the age of 18 or 19, I actually told my mom what I really did, and she was so surprised. She's like, "I can't believe all these years you were doing that." I was like, "Yeah, I was just always exploring." And that's, I think, part of my fearless nature. And now that I remember who I am, I think it's also part of my training from other star systems where I was an explorer, I was an ambassador, and I loved new things, and I love to learn and observe and sometimes on these buses, yeah, there's sensitivities and this observe a self, noticing things like the way the people behave, but also like some premonitions. I think in the book I was mentioning I had a premonition about this woman, and I told her to get off the stop, and she was resistant. And then later we learned that actually, like I said, there was like an accident that happened that I saved her from. There was little moments that I recognized. They were like magic moments, I would say, right? Miracles were happening around me, but I just took it as it is and never really fully comprehended what was happening. And then later, I think in the book I mentioned my experience in Israel when we moved when I was 10 years old, and I lived through the Gulf War and through some difficult periods of time where we had to wear gas masks to school when I was in sixth grade. And that was when I started really confronted the, the death and impermanence, I would say, of life. And the big miracle that was mentioned in the book was 1994 when I was on a bus stop. And I think that was the time for that I had true connection. I didn't know at the time what it was, but now I realize that's when it really started for me. When I started listening to this voice that guided me, my higher self, really. And so we were on this bus stop in this beautiful day, and my friend and I were kind of skipping the last period of school, and on this gorgeous day, and I lived in the valley north of Israel. So we had like Nazareth and many, like, Jesus's mountains were kind of like around me. Like it was just my, beautiful, very free and agricultural space. And environment was very different than Soviet times. Soviet times was more contracted. Here it was just a lot of sun and beautiful nature and fruits. And anyway, it was a beautiful April day, and we were just standing out there, just wanted to enjoy life like, 14-year-olds do. And this voice, yeah, started basically directing me to leave this bus stop. And it was a very busy hub. And my friend and I were having an ice cream. It was like the last thing I wanted to do is leave. And it just started getting really loud. It was this like inner voice that was like, no, there's like danger. It didn't say it was danger. It was like, you have to go now. You have to cross the street. And every part of me resisted it, but it was so loud that luckily I did pay attention. And I grabbed my friend who was also like, what's going on here? And it was pretty large intersection, and we crossed and we turned the corner, and the whole thing blew up. And at the time, this was the first bus bombing in Israel. It was so disorienting because we thought, I don't even remember, like I said, like a piece of a plane fell off. Like we didn't really understand what was going on. And today, like, with all the news in Israel, it's a given thing. It's like missiles flying, terrorist bombs happening. But at the time, it was a very peaceful period. And so it was unexpected. It was a shock, and led to a lot of, interesting contemplations and healings that I had to do. What's amazing, Catherine, as I published this book, I was sitting with it, and my childhood friend Maya, who I mentioned in the book, who was with me, she actually lives in Ohio, and I felt like, oh, as I was actually doing an audiobook and recording it, I had my high self guiding me to reach out to her, and I did. And I told her about the book, and I said, "You're in the book, so I'm gonna mail you the book." So I sent it to her, and she read it in one weekend, and she sent me a note back, and it was very beautiful and healing. I'm getting emotional because I feel for myself, I've done so much work. I kind of closed that and collapsed that timeline. I harmonized it. And for her to resurface that, she was telling me that she actually was still waking up in the middle of the night with some of PTSD from 14 years old. And I didn't realize that. I mean, we haven't been that close since. And this was a really beautiful moment for both of us to reconcile. So that's, yeah, it's incredible. Sometimes it takes us that long to come to that moment of acknowledgement and healing.
Thank you so much for sharing that tender moment with your friend. That's just so, and it is very powerful, isn't it, when we acknowledge something like that with somebody else who shared the experience with us, but actually has traveled differently since. And that can be divisive, or it can be very connecting. It sounds like for you two, it was connecting.
Yeah, and she's not into spirituality so much. And but yeah, has open mind, and she knew that I'm doing what I'm doing. And but I think this is real and raw. And I think at the end of the day, we are humans, no matter what connections we have. These difficult experiences also what makes us vulnerable and what makes us really be grateful for the light that we have or the guidance that we have in these magical moments where we actually protected because we have greater things to do. And so, and now both of us are moms and, we have beautiful families, but that was a pivotal moment in our life that really changed the course of where we are.
Yeah. You said something very fascinating in the book about the effect of that experience on you, where you said that there was a tearing, a fracturing that took place, and that my recollection is that you were talking about there was a whole question about your recovery from that, but also a whole question of the kind of alchemical meaning or power of that. Would you like to share something about that? Because I thought that was very different from the sorts of thought forms that most of us have in relationship to that sort of traumatic experience.
Yeah, this actually very much connects to our initial conversation about integration. So, in the shamanic tradition, we talk about it as soul retrieval. So, at the moment when the trauma happens, in many, experience different traumas, especially as children, we don't always know how to process the trauma in the moment. So we freeze our memory because, again, memory is non local. It feels like it's in our brain, but we already know from scientific discoveries and enough evidence that memory is not really, it's not really in the brain, it's non local. So the shamanic way makes sense now that this particular experience was so much to process. It's like it was like a blur that day for a while. Like I couldn't see it. I had to clear a lot of energy around it to start seeing exactly what was going on because there's so much that we freeze this soul piece, right? And then later, many years after when we do the trauma work, it's almost like the memory starts opening up, clarity happens, and we reintegrate in the soul piece. When we do soul retrieval in shamanism, someone actually even can travel with you as as another power animal and collect that soul piece and blow it into you. I've done a lot of shamanic journeys with people where I would blow the soul pieces for them or the other way around. Um, Going back to the phoenix, when I stepped into my phoenix, someone did a soul retrieval with me, and she was pretty new to it, and she collected um, a nebula and blew it back into me like a black hole. And she then later was like, does this make sense for you? I'm like, yeah, I actually went into this somatic wave when she did that. I was like, totally makes sense because, like I said, the phoenix as much as destroy as a creator. So all of it is possible, like to take that all in. Um, so I do believe quantumly, there's a tear that happens in that moment in the timeline, and we have to go back and s- recollect that piece or heal that moment in time, collapse it in and bring it in. And that's what happens in a lot of sessions that I do. People come for quantum healing hypnosis, and I regress them back into their past lives, whether on Earth or off Earth. At the end, there's always like a healing moment where I ask, what was the purpose of this lifetime? What was the healing? Why? What did you need to learn? And at the moment, the soul is actually reflecting on the lesson. And it's kind of doing that integration into the now, because even though you're deep in theta hypnosis, the person is still conscious of what's happening. And so that energy is almost like resurface from the subconscious as a trauma into the conscious, reintegrated. And it's like, yeah, whatever that situation was, whether, you got killed in a battlefield or stabbed or whatever it was, or, some people, for instance, have fears of water because they were drowned in past life. I mean, there's so many stories. But as you recognize that moment, you integrate it and you bring that soul piece back into you. And that's the work that I've done myself, and I help others to do.
Beautiful. And I'm aware that's only a part of what you're doing. So, but an important part, very significant part. And I felt that the way you described that whole process in the book was very human. This is something that really struck me because you're talking about concepts like, okay, I was living in these other galaxies, and I was this, and I was doing this, and we were deciding to go back to Earth and try to do some healing for Earth, and all of these things you're talking about, and but you somehow make it really personal, so that as I'm following you through it in the book, I'm not feeling like I'm watching a Star Wars movie. I think at one point you joke that you think some people might think you've watched too many space movies. I don't think there's such a thing as too many space movies, actually. But so, people might think that. But the way you describe it is very, very human. And I had an interesting reaction at one point where I was thinking, well, this is fascinating and I love all this information, but, you know, why do I have to spend time thinking about it? As opposed to just, okay, it's interesting. And then you went on and said something about you were proposing that it's very important that if those memories are present for us, it is important we connect to them because it feeds into our mission for being here now. And I found that a very challenging idea. And I think I found it a challenging idea because to me, there's more than enough to think about that feeds into my mission just here on Earth, or just any kind of notion of being connected to the divine without thinking about, oh my God, I was a Lyran and then I was a this and then I was a that and that, almost as if it's just too much to even consider. You know what I mean? And so I wanted to share that with you and give you the
Yeah,
opportunity to comment on that response that I had,
absolutely.
if
And
you'd
your
like to.
response, Catherine, is also something I think I mentioned. I was like, it might not be for you. It might not necessarily be important for you, but there is also many who come to me for either QHHT session that I mentioned or Galactic Akashic records, where I look at their records and specifically wanted to know what star systems they went to. And sometimes there's specific qualities that they have currently in their personality and the way they address life. So they want to know where's it coming from, and also why they feel, for instance, lonely or missing home. And because in this lifetime everything was great, and so as I look at their records or they go on the journey themselves and find pieces, we start seeing that, oh, well, that had to, let's say, do with the galactic war, with the Lyran war, where the person's initial life in the Lyra system on the planet, was destroyed. And so that's when the soul started migrating to different places around the galaxy. and it never felt like it belonged anywhere. So there was this separation. This, so yes, we separating from the source, but even being in the form, any type of form, whether galactic or non-galactic, um, there's a separation between angelic beings and just dropping into density, right, into a body. Um, and then there's separation just from the experiences. So for many, I think it has to be an inner resonance. Like if they want to know, it is possibly something that they want to discover themselves, um, and there's answers and healing there always. Because I haven't had one person who had a session with me who hasn't come out changed in some way or another, or it gave them new understanding of self. And I think that's really what this is about. Is just deeper self discovery, and it might be just enough to do your astrology chart, look at your planets, and be like, this is what it is, or I'm good as I am. I don't need more information. And but if someone wants to dig in, and maybe there is something in their life that they, is bothering them, and they want to find the root cause, because that's kind of what I'm digging for always. Not just a band-aid, but a root cause of the pattern. And I think I've mentioned that in the book too. That's what this work is about, is to find out the patterns that we need to heal. And I'll mention something that I'm not mentioning in the book, Catherine, that's also very personal. That came up also in my own story with my father. So the father in this lifetime, I've always had like weird relationship with him, and he went through a cancer healing and we got closer. I actually did a session for him with QHHC, and that was beautiful. But there was something that came up again, and I just was like, I thought I healed this. I thought like years ago I said an ayahuasca ceremony and I purged it all, and then I did this, this, that, and I found forgiveness. We reconciled. Wonderful. Why is this coming again? And actually, it was really interesting. It wasn't even myself; it was my husband who went to meditate, and he got the guidance because he's also very spiritual connected. He's whatever, my twin flame. I don't like the labels, but we in a divine union. And so he came out of meditation and he was telling me, oh, they actually showed me this is not about your father in this lifetime. There's the same pattern. The issue is actually with your galactic father. And I mentioned that in my book because I had to go and do my own session for myself and go back in time to that Lyran beginning where I was like a princess of royalty, and my father made a decision to marry me into this Draco alliance and all of these things that happened. And as I went back in this deep meditation for 5 hours, it was a very deep experience. It was like real movie for me because I was experiencing real time. And that's what happens really. Time is really alive, and we think it's linear, but it's very multidimensional. And so we open the time. I think in my book I mentioned it like it's layers of a cake, right? At any moment we can slice a cake and we can look at the layer. And as we go back and we heal that moment, it actually also pulls energy, like I said, into now. And in my case, I was healing the pattern with my father. And the energy just like eased up after. And it had to do with that galactic father. We reconciled. And even more so to make it like really woo woo, in my meditations, every time I tried to go on different ships, I maybe had access to one or two, but not as much to the Galactic Federation. After, because my father, my galactic father, was a high council. After I healed that, the energy cleared. It was like we shifted all together, and all of a sudden I have access to all these Galactic Federation ships that I never had before. So it's, however you want to take it, my experience has been. So that's why for me, it's very real. Everything I write about or the work I do with others, I've experienced it firsthand myself. And then I see for others how it's rippling into their life.
Absolutely. Well, that comes across very strongly in the book. There's nothing there about you have to believe this or agree with this. This is my story. And it's very captivating. And I think the experience I had that I shared with you was like a kind of an initial, I would describe that more as an expression of resistance to more information. You know, you had sometimes in life, there are those moments where someone taps you on the shoulder. Would you like the next piece of information? And there's a party that goes, yeah, I really do. Another part that goes, I really don't. You know, there's that sort of, I don't know. Have you ever experienced that as you've gone through your life moments where you've
I
sort
talk
of,
about resistances a lot. Resistance in the field in general. When I do energy work for others, I see resistances as these like knots of energy that I help others to clear out. But I think the resistance you're talking about is the resistance of the ego versus the divine will, the highest self. And so we have to understand, if I zoom out again, like, why are we here, right? So we, as a soul, which is a software, we come into every lifetime into this hardware. We pick lineages, families, environments, right? We have certain goals, so to speak. And the ego likes to keep it very safe because sameness equals safety. If you think about like the primordial days when we in the caves, we knew that, there is certain path that we take and there are berries that we can get there, but there's a lion running around outside. And if we deviate from that path, we might be, eaten alive. So everything had to be, in a more contracted way because and it was fear-based, the survival of the fetus, right? But then if we move from that primordial reptilian brain into prefrontal cortex, which is where our connections to the third eye, to pineal gland, to the higher chakras, high frequencies too, that's when we start really, and we move outside of that energy into higher connection, then everything is much more expanded. There's no contraction. And so it's much more about the unknown. But the ego is so used to this like, sandbox that it plays with. And every time we're born into each lifetime, the other part of this game of consciousness on earth is the multidimensional amnesia. We don't remember our past lives. And I talk about that a lot, I think, in the book too, and my different, reels that I put out. It's like other, you know, star systems, when you incarnate from one star system to another, you always remember actually what you've done before. It's like you have access to the Akashic records. But here, the whole thing is like we've been in this density so disconnected from the source energy that we haven't been remembering. And in some ways, this was also for preservation and for us to learn how to integrate this. And so it's whatever the soul is ready for, right? But it's good to challenge the ego and step beside, beyond the fear, because everything is on the other side of fear. Anything you can imagine is real. And so where do we find this dance, this friendship, I would say, between ego and divine will? Because it's actually beautiful to have identification and individualization that we don't get to have in other star systems. Like, I'm thinking again about one of my lifetimes and many lifetimes in Andromeda. It's a kind of cohesive collective. It's telepathic. You don't really have secrets. It's all like information interchangeably shared with everyone. So you're not as much the uniqueness you can feel here, you don't necessarily feel there. So that's the beauty of expression here, because your soul signature here really gets to be very individual. But at the same time, it's like it because it tries to protect itself so much, it's trying to control. That's the resistant. It's the controller. And it's like, how do we bend a little bit the sandbox and invite it on the journey of the unknown and say, well, we can still, you're not disappearing. I'm not squashing you. Because a lot of people talk about ego death. We're not killing the ego. No, all we're doing is softening it. We allow it to surrender deeper and really connect to our soul. And then there's a dance, right? There's always free choice. And so the ego, that's how I see the ego operating. And it's really funny, Catherine, in my in QHHT, which is Dolores Cannon's method, when you have a person deep in meditation and theta, right? So that's the brainwave when we usually experience dreams where the eyes are moving and REM. The person is conscious, but they're close to like falling asleep, right? And then as you move them through past lives, the most actually interesting part is when you invite in the higher self to participate and you ask in the ego to step away and kind of get the higher self into the driver's seat. The ego goes into the passenger seat. Some people are really easy in doing that, and the higher self steps in so powerfully and sometimes with a different voice to the point where a person doesn't remember what they said, so everything is recorded. But some people, of course, resist even when they deep in theta. There's a lot of resistance. So I have to have these conversations, this like, you're not going away. You're just sitting on the bench. You can still watch the show, like this negotiation with the ego. And that's how you know, like, how, every person is different. So some just more open and the others just really tightly want to hold on. And that's okay. There's no judgment around it. It's like where we are in our journey, in our lifetime, and how much we're willing to surrender.
Fantastic. I think you've been visiting the inside of my head. But
Gathering, you're not alone. Trust me, everyone has these battles.
that's so beautifully described and explained. Thank you so much. Beautiful. And there was actually a point in the book, tell me if I got this wrong, where you spoke about you being part of a group of beings who were actually intentionally creating these beings, which turned out to be the earth beings, who are living in a more dense situation and have a more dense form, perhaps, so that we would have certain experiences that you felt were necessary. So did I get that right from...
So in just few words, my understanding from Akashic records and also talking to other pretty influential galactic historians in our different kind of spiritual communities, like Debbie Solaris is one of my teachers and one of my friends who also endorsed my book. We're not even from this universe, let's put it this way, but some of us, many of us actually came from Andromeda galaxy, and that's the galaxy that's nearby, and eventually in like 4.5 billion years we actually going to merge together. What I saw, she saw, and many others is that actually Milky Way was created by these creative beings, the Elohim collective, that many started kind of congregating, I would say, from different universes at the Andromeda galaxy. At the Andromeda galaxy, um, there's many more dimensions and frequencies, and it can have the densification and physicality that we can have here. And so that's why Milky Way was created. It's like a mirror galaxy, but let's say we don't fully know how many dimensions in Andromeda, but I'm just going to throw out a number like 24. We kind of know that Milky Way has about 12. So it's kind of deducted by 2. And so in these different dimensions. So these star beings with Andromeda, Arcturians, others, they can be in different dimensions, but not as many actually in a third dimension where we are right now. This is kind of like from all the dimensional levels, this is as bottom as you can get. And the amount of an individuation that I was mentioning and densification that we have here is very different than in other dimensions. So, yes, many of us volunteered to be here to learn this particular experience of Earth, because many actually we've trained in other systems to be here. Not everyone could actually come here. There was a specific, my understanding, like a requirement that you had to pass to even be able to incarnate here. And Dolores Cannon collected a lot of this information through her many, many regression sessions she's done. And she talks about these 3 waves of volunteers. It started around World War II when we detonated the first nuclear bomb. And that's when the star beings realized, oh wow, these humans can actually do damage in the universe. Like we got to do something about this. We got to, because there's such a law of non-interference. So they couldn't just show up on our doorstep. Will they show up? Possibly. There's a lot of talk right now about open disclosure, but we're not even there yet. So, and the only way to make a change is to have boots on the ground. And that's where like a call went out to the galaxy to have volunteers come and incarnate. And these many star seeds that came here. So there was a first wave in the 60s, 70s, and a second wave, the third wave, and now these new children that are coming in, they're completely different frequency bandwidth than, their parents. My child, for instance, came in 2013, but I was pregnant with him in 2012. So it was very new frequency. And I think I was mentioning in the book, every shaman, every ceremony I went to, they were like, oh, you have new soul there. And I was like, I didn't, at the time, I was like, really? Like, but I, I had to go through a lot of initiations and tests and letting go. And I did feel like I had to match this frequency even to bring him into the world. And I'm observing now there's more and more new souls coming in, and they first timers, and their frequency is very different. They're just so empathic, they kind of, but they also know how to adapt here a little easier. And so this is kind of the game we're playing now, because Earth is shifting, we are shifting, and there's talk about moving to fifth dimension. Um, and so we on this journey of transmutation, transformation, and opening a timeline where Earth is shifting into these higher frequency bandwidths. We also gone through a lot of cosmic changes. Literally yesterday, it was all day, everyone was talking about this comet. You probably heard Three-Eye Atlas and how it's moving towards the sun, and how because of its proximity to the sun, it's also activating these light codes. So the sun has been super potent and active at solar maximum. And we are quantum beings. What does that mean? We're actually made of light. We are light particles. And so there's light within us. Like they already broke down the DNA and they found like biophotons. The mitochondria, the organelle in our cell, is constantly making energy, it makes light. So as we have more light particles coming into our field, because besides the physical body, we have all these other light bodies, emotional, mental, and others, it starts activating our energy field. And also we're going through a photonic belt. The star system, the solar system is also moving closer to the galactic center. So all of these things right now, and these new interstellar objects coming into our space, they're meant to activate these memories. They're meant to activate the channeling abilities, the different clairvoyant, clair, clairvoyances, like all the omnisciences that we have, because many people thinking, oh, we have to be born with it. And what I'm learning is no, it's something you actually, expand and remember and activate in your field. It's available there. And we can talk about light language or source language. If you asked me 78 years ago that I would be doing that, and I'll be, doing channeling live on different podcasts, I would laugh at you. But it is happening for me today. So I know it's all available for us. We are incredible multidimensional beings, and we don't give ourselves enough credit for who we really are. And so I'm super excited to see how we all awaken to our gifts.
Amazing. Thank you. That's beautiful. I completely agree 100%. Honestly, I could carry on talking to you for hours because it's just so beautiful and so fascinating. And thank you as well for the gift of the book and what you've gifted to the world with that. Would you like to, before we finish, you said about pulling a card, possibly.
Oh yeah, and you have a deck too. But yeah, let's open a card. I have my deck here as well. And let's see what the message is for the audience as we wrap this episode.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Oh wow, look at that. I got Bell Rock.
And I have got
Interdimensional Earth Portal. Oh yes.
Bank of Humility.
which is for you, power surrender, Catherine. So my message is a sacred site calls you. Through Earth's heartbeat, star wisdom awakens. What place is calling your soul to visit and remember? So this is the time right now where Earth is also talking to us, and I do a lot of Earth grid work. So places on Earth call me. Sedona is definitely, this is my one of my favorite spots, Bell Rock. And so if you feel you want to deepen your practice or deepen your connection, listen to places on Earth that really call like these sacred sites. And doesn't have to be necessarily a megalithic sites. It could be just an area that, is a vortex space. And this is our also journey right now. So as we awakening, so is Earth. She's like a teenager and we are helping her. So by us coming to those places and, connecting with her deeper, there is beautiful connection, interchangeable connection happens between both of us. So yeah, that's the message. I love it, and I love that you got the ankh. I'm wearing
Ankh
the
of
earrings with
beauty.
the ankh. I don't know if
Power,
you see them.
power of surrender. Oh yes, you're wearing
I'm wearing the
true power. True power arises when ego dissolves into presence. Stand in silent strength and let grace open the way.
I love it. Yes.
So beautiful. I mean, these are just gorgeous, these cards.
Thank
Absolutely
you.
gorgeous. And these are your cards, which you've created.
I've created, so as I was finishing the book, actually it was already in production, like we were just formatting it. Um, I woke up one morning and I just got this huge download about creating the Oracle deck. And kind of the message was, 300 pages. Some people might read it, some not. Thank you, Catherine, for reading my book and resonating with that. But the message was to create a tool that can be used kind of on a daily basis and interact with these energies. And some of the images I had, some not, but it literally showed me how to break. It's 44 cards, so it's like 4 groupings of 11, and it's all about some of the messages in the book, which is the 3 parts of the book: remembering, expansion, and mastery. So it's also cards around transmutation and remembering, cards about the journey itself, cards about other connections. So that there is like order to how they were categorized, and because of the connection to ancient Egypt and Atlantis, and so as you have the cards, a lot of them have those symbols and those messages from resonate with that. They most likely had lifetimes in that civilization.
Yeah. Amazing. Wow. So we've talked about so much today, and I know there's so much more we could have talked about. Has there been a favorite part of our conversation for you today?
Actually, I love that I was very emotional, thinking about that moment because I don't talk about it that much, and I think there's like beauty in having others see you in the public way and be vulnerable. So that was really beautiful moment for me. So thank you for holding that space, Catherine, and for diving into the book as deeply as you have, and also voicing where maybe it was just a little too much. It wasn't, and that's why like even the book itself has so many chapters. And it's like I was telling people, you can either read it sequentially, but also you can be multidimensional. It can be an oracle deck that you can just open and then like, chapter on sacred geometry or chapter on Kundalini activation or what is light language and how can I connect to channeling. It will gravitate you to where you need to be. And I think my overall message to the audience is just stay curious, stay open, and some things might resonate with you, some not in general. There's just so much information right now. I feel we are bombarded, Catherine, with information because in Atlantean, ancient Egyptian timelines, we had what was called mystery schools. The mystery schools for the initiates were these secret sects where we were prepared for this knowledge, and it was kind of like linearly prepared. We had to go through different tests and initiations. in today's world, there's internet, right? And everyone is just putting so much stuff out there, podcasts, and it's sometimes distorted. Not every information you receive is actually accurate. So it is up on to us right now to really listen. And if it's feeling a little off or you're not ready for it, move on, right? I always say there's like truth in everything. So there's no absolute truth. So maybe there's a piece you take here, a piece there, but that piece might not resonate. And I think you have to do that work because you have to create your own mystery school of your own evolution. And what I would also encourage is not to all run around and look for a lot of information. Also take the time to sit internally and do meditations, and 'cause all the wisdom, all the knowledge is within you already. And only when you sit in a place of quiet and go deeper into your heart, deeper into that space of connection with the universe, the records, the information is already available for you. So explore in both ways, inner and outer.
Thank you. And I thank you so much. That's so beautiful. And I would like to say just one or two very quick final things about the book. So one thing is that at the end of every chapter, there's a beautiful activation and meditation. And there's also a reminder about what you just said then about the importance of the stillness, the integration, the rest. And you even say, maybe don't go on to the next chapter yet. Maybe don't go on till tomorrow. And I would just say that that's so beautifully paced, which means that I felt very held all the way through the book. If I could move in and out of different experiences through the book and feel held regardless. And the other thing I want to really acknowledge is the amount of work you put into it in terms of all of your own experience, all of your research, all of these different, it's almost like a kaleidoscope, this book. And it's got all these different angles in on the question. And as you're reading it, you might think, well, what does that have to do with that? But as you go through it, you find it all fits together. It's all part of a whole picture. And in this world where a lot of us have never read a book, right? And a lot of us have never done any hard intellectual work and research, so I really admire that in what you've done, remaining completely open to the divine in the way that you have, and the galactic and all of those aspects, and then the tangible, real, practical research and groundwork that you've done. And you put it all in the one book.
Yeah, I try to create that bridge between scientific and esoteric because I think it's important. It's important to ground it because, some of us are very right-brained and others are very left-brained. And sometimes it's like, the esoterics just seem so ooh. And I think it needs to integrate right in the middle somewhere. And I think that was my intention. And I don't know if Catherine, you explored the meditations also on my website that go along with the book. So there's more meditations you can actually listen to. And the audiobook just got released on an Amazon. So if you don't have the patience to read, now you can actually experience the narration, which I've done myself, and the activations at the end of each chapter at its own file. So you can like just take the time to listen to that. And I do not just in English, but I bring in also light language in there, so it's actually an experience. And that's something I work really hard to get the audiobook done so that more people can listen to it. And some people just driving in the car, they just don't have the time to read, and I get that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's been beautiful meeting you and talking to you today. I love your work. I think it's absolutely wonderful. And I love the cards, love the book. I think it's fantastic. And so thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you. And I just wanted to mention that I don't know when this episode is coming out, but on November 19th, I'm doing actually hosting a summit. It's called Reclaim Your Cosmic Power, because my book, it's called Mastering Quantum Creation, Awaken the Phoenix Within, Manifest Your Reality, and Reclaim Your Cosmic Power. Gave me an idea, and so I'm co-creating with a dear friend of mine, Nikki Hu, and we have an incredible panel of speakers from Debbie Solaris, who I'm a big admirer of, Debbie Dashing, and Tony Ghazi, who actually channeled the forward to my book. and you get to hear it in the audio and the back of the book. So all these incredible speakers, and so we'll be going even deeper, and it's free summit you can sign up for. It's on my website as well. You'll see it on top of the menu. So that's something that's opening up, I think, for sign up soon. So November 19th, join us. And that's the new moon in Scorpio. And as you know, Catherine, Scorpio is all about going into the darkness and transmutation, transformation, what we're just talking about today. So it's very important.
And if people miss that, will they be able to watch a recording of that?
Yeah, there's 3 different options. You can just be present for a summit, or you can get a replay. And there's also a VIP package where you can get different gifts from the speakers and from myself and from Nikki. So whatever fits best your schedule. Yeah, so that's an exciting adventure, because I wanted to put the summit together when I was writing the book, and now it's actually manifesting itself. So putting the manifestation formula into practice as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And it's been an absolute joy. So thank you, everybody. That's it for Truth and Transcendence for today. Please tell your friends, give us a thumbs up, and do go and check out Diana's website and all her things she's doing. That's dianadivine.com, DianaDivine.com. And thanks again to Diana.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. It really helps if you give a thumbs up, a 5-star rating, a review, and share with your friends. If you're looking for transformational coaching or an intensive transformational weekend workshop experience, I can help with that. You can actually help the show by making a donation. Until next time, take care.